Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight, we're diving into the entire history of the Roman Empire, from mud to global superpower. Before you settle in, don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you're enjoying the journey so far. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing people tuning in from different corners of the world. Now, get cozy. Dim the lights, maybe turn on the fan or the AC for that soft background sound, and let's gently drift into tonight's story together. We begin not with marble, we begin with mud. Imagine a river, the Tiber. It snakes through the Italian peninsula like an artery, sluggish and brown under a heavy Mediterranean sky. It is the 8th century before Christ, and the world is large, fragmented, and terrifyingly dark. If you were to stand on one of the 7 hills rising from the marshland, say the Palatine, you would not see columns, you would not see temples, you would see huts, straw roofs, the smell of wood smoke and wet earth. This is the baseline. This is the 0 hour. The story we tell ourselves about Rome usually starts with twins, Romulus and Remus, abandoned to the elements, suckled by a she-wolf, surviving on feral instinct until they grew to build walls. But let's look past the poetry. Let's look at the mechanics. The myth tells us something fundamental about the Roman DNA from day one. Survival is a violent, deliberate act. Romulus kills Remus because Remus leaps over his wall. It is a lesson in boundaries. It is an announcement to the ancient world that a line drawn in the dirt by a Roman is a line written in blood. But why here? Why this swampy bend in the river? Geography is destiny. The Tiber was a crossing point, a natural trade junction where the salt routes intersected. The hills provided high ground against predators and rival tribes, the Etruscans to the north, the Samnites to the south. Rome was born at a crossroads of conflict and commerce. It wasn't an isolated paradise, it was a fortress built in the middle of a highway. In these early centuries, Rome is a monarchy. 7 kings, the legends say. Romulus gives them order. Numa Pompilius gives them religion, the quiet, structured rituals designed to keep the gods appeased. The later kings, the Etruscans, give them technology, the Cloaca Maxima, the great sewer that drains the marsh between the hills. This is crucial. Before Rome could conquer the Mediterranean, it had to conquer its own swamps. It had to lay the literal infrastructure of civilization. But power concentrated in a single hand always curdles. The 7th king, Tarquin the Proud, rules with tyranny and arrogance. The breaking point isn't economic, it's moral. The outrage against the noblewoman Lucretia sparks an uprising. The Romans, led by Lucius Junius Brutus, do something radical. They don't just kill the king, they kill the concept of the king. They swear an oath that would echo down through 500 years. Never again will a single man rule Rome. The year is 509 BC. The monarchy is dead. The republic is born. What is a republic? Res publica. The public thing. It is the realization that a state belongs to its people, not to a master. But let's not romanticize it. The early Roman Republic was not a democracy in the Athenian sense. It was a rigorous, deeply conservative oligarchy dominated by the patricians, the old money aristocracy who claimed descent from the original senators of Romulus. Below them were the plebeians, the farmers, the artisans, the soldiers, the men who did the work and fought the wars. The tension between these two classes, the conflict of the orders, is the engine that drives Roman political genius. For more than 2 centuries, the plebeians don't riot with fire. They riot with absence. They walk out. They stage a series of secessions, literally marching out of the city and refusing to fight Rome's wars until their voices are heard. Imagine the audacity. A hostile army is marching toward the gates, and the Roman working class says, "Defend it yourselves." This pressure forces the creation of something beautiful, the 12 Tables, the first written Roman law code. It is the transition from arbitrary rule to systemic rule. If the law is carved in bronze and displayed in the forum, the patrician magistrate cannot change the rules on a whim. The plebeians win the right to elect their own magistrates, the tribunes of the plebs, whose bodies are sacred, sacrosanct, and who possess a single, devastating power: veto. I forbid. The Roman constitution is an intricate clockwork of checks and balances designed to prevent tyranny. At the top are 2 consuls, elected for just 1 year. They hold imperium, the absolute power to command the state and the army, but they must agree. One can veto the other. Behind them sits the Senate, a council of elders who control the treasury and foreign policy. They don't pass laws, they issue decrees, senatus consulta, but their prestige is so massive that their advice carries the weight of law. This system creates a unique psychology. A Roman citizen does not fight for a king. He fights for the Senatus Populusque Romanus, SPQR, the Senate and the people of Rome. It is an abstract corporate identity. When a legionary marches into battle, he carries that standard. He is an owner of the franchise. Now, look at the map. Rome is still just a dot in central Italy. To survive, it must expand, not out of a grand plan for world domination, but out of a profound, almost paranoid need for security. Every neighbor is a potential threat. To the Romans, the best defense is a relentless, preemptive offense. They fight the Latins, they absorb them. They fight the Samnites in the rugged Apennine Mountains, learning the hard way that their rigid phalanx formations, copied from the Greeks, are useless in broken terrain. So they adapt. They create the maniple system, the phalanx with joints, a flexible, chess-like infantry formation that can break and reform on the fly. This adaptability becomes the hallmark of Roman military science. They don't need to be the smartest or the most creative, they just need to be the best at learning from their mistakes. By 280 BC, Rome has pushed south to the heel of the Italian boot, coming into contact with the wealthy Greek colonies. Terrified of the rising Roman power, the city of Tarentum calls for help from across the sea. They invite Pyrrhus of Epirus, a cousin of Alexander the Great and one of the finest generals of the age. Pyrrhus arrives with professional mercenaries, brilliant tactics, and war elephants, animals the Romans have never seen before. He defeats the Romans at Heraclea. He defeats them again at Osculum. But something strange happens. After every battle, Pyrrhus looks at his losses and realizes he cannot sustain them. The Romans keep coming. They lose an entire army, and within weeks, they field another one. Their manpower reserves, drawn from their network of Italian allies, seem infinite. Pyrrhus famously remarks, "Another such victory, and we are ruined." This is the origin of the Pyrrhic victory. The Romans don't surrender because they don't know how. To Rome, a treaty signed after a defeat isn't peace, it's submission. They fight until they win. Pyrrhus packs up his elephants and sails home. Rome is now the undisputed master of the Italian peninsula. But as they look out across the narrow straits of Sicily, they see a shadow cast by a massive maritime superpower based in North Africa. The stage is set for the clash that will redefine human history: Carthage.
Let us talk about Carthage. If Rome was a creature of the earth, rooted in soil and iron, Carthage was a creature of the sea, built on silver, purple dye, and timber. They were the Phoenician merchant kings of the Western Mediterranean. Their navy was unmatched, their wealth was legendary. Sicily, the fertile island sitting right between them, becomes the powder keg. The First Punic War, 264 to 231 BC, is a 23-year slog of endurance. It is fought largely at sea, a medium where Rome has zero experience. When the war begins, Rome doesn't even possess a fleet of warships. What do? They find a wrecked Carthaginian quinquereme on a beach, take it apart, copy the design, and build a navy of 100 ships in 2 months. But building ships isn't the same as knowing how to sail them. The Carthaginians maneuver circles around them. So the Romans change the rules of engagement. They invent the corvus, the crow. A heavy boarding bridge with a massive iron spike at the end. When a Carthaginian ship gets close, the Romans drop the bridge. The spike slams into the enemy deck, locking the vessels together. Suddenly, a sea battle becomes a land battle. The Roman legionaries storm across the bridge. It is brutal, clumsy, and devastatingly effective. Rome wins the first war through sheer stubborn attrition, bankrupting Carthage and seizing Sicily as its first overseas province. But peace is just an intermission. Enter Hannibal Barca. He is raised on an altar of hatred, swearing an oath to his father never to be a friend to Rome. In 218 BC, he launches the most audacious military campaign in antiquity. He doesn't take the sea, he takes the land. He marches an army of North Africans, Spaniards, Gauls, and 37 war elephants across the Alps in the dead of winter. Think of the sheer logistics, the freezing winds, the treacherous ice, the hostile mountain tribes rolling boulders down upon his columns. Half his army dies on the march. But when he descends into the Po Valley of northern Italy, he is a ghost made flesh. For 15 years, Hannibal tears Italy apart. He is a tactical genius, a master of psychology who reads Roman generals like a book. At the Trebia, he coaxes them across a freezing river into an ambush. At Lake Trasimene, he uses the morning mist to trap an entire army between the water and the hills, wiping them out in a matter of hours. The Senate panics. They appoint a dictator, Fabius Maximus, who realizes that you cannot beat Hannibal in an open field. Fabius adopts a new strategy: avoid direct battle, harass Hannibal's supply lines, burn the crops, wear him down by inches. It is effective, but it feels un-Roman. It feels cowardly to a people raised on aggressive glory. The Romans call him cunctator, the delayer, and demand a decisive battle. They get it. August 2, 216 BC. Cannae. The Romans field the largest army they have ever assembled, 80,000 men. Hannibal has roughly half that number. The Roman strategy is simple: a massive, heavy wedge of infantry pushed right through the center of the Carthaginian line. Hannibal anticipates this. He deploys his forces in an inverted crescent, bowing out toward the Romans. His center is composed of his weakest troops, Gauls and Spaniards, while his elite veterans are placed on the flanks. As the Roman juggernaut advances, Hannibal's center deliberately, slowly retreats, drawing the Romans deeper into the trap. Meanwhile, Hannibal's superior cavalry sweeps the Roman horsemen from the field and circles around to the rear. The crescent bows backward, wrapping around the sides of the dense Roman column. The trap snaps shut. It is the classic double envelopment, the perfect tactical masterpiece. The Romans are packed so tightly together they cannot draw their swords.
The slaughter lasts for hours. By sunset, nearly 70,000 Roman soldiers lie dead in the dust of Apulia, the Senate losing its sons, its consuls, its future. It remains one of the deadliest single days of combat in human history. If any other nation had suffered a canaille, they would have sued for peace before the week was out. Rome refuses. They ban the word peace. They lower the enlistment age, arm slaves, and double down. Hannibal enters the south of Italy, but he cannot take the city of Rome itself. He lacks the siege engines, and more importantly, he lacks support from home. The Carthaginian Senate is jealous of his power and refuses to send reinforcements. Rome finds its own savior in Publius Cornelius Scipio. Scipio studies Hannibal's tactics. He doesn't fight Hannibal in Italy, he invades Spain, cutting off Hannibal's supply base. Then he invades Africa, forcing Carthage to recall their golden boy. In 202 BC, at the Battle of Zama, Scipio faces Hannibal. Scipio neutralizes the Carthaginian elephants by leaving open lanes in his infantry lines, blowing horns to frighten the beasts into trampling their own troops. Scipio defeats Hannibal. He earns the title Africanus. Carthage is broken. 50 years later, in the Third Punic War, Rome returns to finish the job. They destroy the city, brick by brick, sell the survivors into slavery, and legend says they sow the fields with salt so nothing will ever grow there again. The Western Mediterranean is a Roman lake.
Victory changes a society faster than defeat. As Rome's armies push east into Greece, Macedonia, and Asia Minor, wealth begins to pour into the city on a scale never before imagined. Gold, silver, art, philosophy, and slaves. Thousands of slaves. This influx of wealth destroys the social fabric of the Republic. The traditional Roman economy was built on the backbone of the small, independent yeoman farmer. The man who owned a few acres of land, grew wheat, and served in the legions when called upon. But these farmers have been away in Greece and Africa for years. When they return, they find their fields overgrown, their homes ruined by Hannibal's campaigns. Worse, they find they cannot compete with the new agro-businesses. The wealthy patricians have used their war profits to buy up massive tracts of land, creating mega-estates called latifundia. These estates are worked entirely by cheap foreign slave labor. The small farmer is squeezed out. He has no choice but to sell his ancestral land to a wealthy senator for pennies on the denarius. Homeless and unemployed, thousands of these veterans drift into the city of Rome, forming a volatile, angry underclass, the urban proletariat. The old virtues, virtus, frugalitas, pietas, are replaced by luxury and greed. The Senate becomes a closed club of billionaires who guard their privileges with fanaticism. Two brothers see the storm coming, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus. They are aristocrats, grandsons of Scipio Africanus, but they champion the cause of the poor. Tiberius is elected tribune of the plebs in 133 BC. He proposes a simple legal reform, enforce the existing laws that limit the amount of public land a single person can own, and redistribute the excess to landless veterans. It's a conservative measure designed to rebuild the middle class and ensure a steady supply of soldiers for the army. But the Senate views it as revolution. They see Tiberius as a tyrant trying to buy the favor of the mob to make himself king. When Tiberius runs for re-election, a break with tradition, a group of senators, led by the Pontifex Maximus, break up a wooden bench in the Forum and beat Tiberius and 300 of his followers to death. Their bodies are thrown into the Tiber. It is the first time political blood is spilled in the Forum since the founding of the Republic. The taboo is broken.
The ballot has been replaced by the club. 10 years later, his younger brother, Gaius Gracchus, tries to continue the reforms, expanding the reforms to include subsidized grain for the poor and citizenship for Italian allies. He meets the same fate. The Senate passes a new decree, the Senatus Consultum Ultimum, giving the consuls the power to do whatever it takes to save the state, effectively legalizing political murder. Gaius is hunted down and dies in a sacred grove. The Gracchi brothers failed, but they exposed the fault lines of the Republic. From this point on, Roman politics is divided into two factions, the optimates, the best men who protect the power of the Senate, and the populares, who use the assembly of the people to push for reforms. The compromise is dead. The dialogue is over. If the political system is broken, the military system is about to follow. Enter Gaius Marius. He is a novus homo, a new man, a brilliant soldier from the countryside who rises to the consulship through raw competence. In 107 BC, Rome faces a manpower crisis. Barbarian tribes are threatening the northern borders, and the traditional property-owning class cannot provide enough soldiers. Marius does something revolutionary. He drops the property qualification entirely. He opens the legions to the landless poor, the capite censi, those counted merely by the head. He turns the army from a temporary militia of citizens into a permanent, professional career force. He standardizes equipment. He makes every soldier carry his own rations and tools, earning them the nickname Marius's Mules. He gives every legion a standard, the Silver Eagle. This is a massive success for military efficiency, but it has a fatal flaw. These new soldiers don't own land. They have nothing to return to. They depend entirely on their general to give them pay, bonuses, and, most importantly, a plot of land when they retire. The army's loyalty shifts. They no longer swear allegiance to the abstract concept of SPQR. They swear allegiance to their general. The legions are no longer state armies. They are private political tools. The first man to exploit this is Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Sulla is Marius's rival, a brilliant, ruthless optimate. When the Senate strips Sulla of a lucrative command in the East and gives it to Marius, Sulla doesn't accept the political defeat. He marches his legions, 6 battle-hardened legions, directly into the city of Rome itself. It is an unspeakable crime. A Roman general crossing the Pomerium, the sacred boundary of the city, with an armed force. Marius flees. Sulla restores the Senate's power, sails east to win his war, and when he returns in 82 BC, he does it again. This time, Sulla makes himself dictator without a time limit. He introduces the proscriptions, daily lists of his political enemies posted in the forum. If your name is on the list, you are an outlaw. Anyone can kill you and claim a cash reward from your estate. The rest goes to Sulla's treasury. Over 9,000 people are murdered in this real estate grab masquerading as political purification. Sulla eventually retires to his country estate, believing he has saved the Republic by restoring the Senate's supremacy. But he didn't save it. He provided a blueprint. He showed the next generation that if you have the loyalty of the army, the laws don't matter. The stage is clear for the final act of the Republic. The curtain rises on 3 men. Pompey the Great, the military prodigy. Marcus Lysius Crassus, the richest man in Rome. And a young, charming aristocrat down on his luck named Julius Caesar. Imagine 3 men sitting in a room, dividing the world.
between them. This is the first triumvirate, formed in 60 BC. It isn't a legal body, it's an underground alliance, an extra-constitutional cartel. Pompey has the military prestige but is frustrated by a stubborn Senate that won't ratify his land grants for his veterans. Crassus has the money. He made his fortune buying up burning buildings in Rome and rebuilding them with slave labor, but he craves military glory to match Pompey. Caesar has the political skill, the popularity with the masses, and a desperate need for money to pay off his massive debts. Together, they are unstoppable. Crassus finances Caesar's campaign for the consulship. Caesar uses his year in office to force through Pompey's land grants, bypassing the Senate completely by taking the vote straight to the popular assembly. As his reward, Caesar secures a 5-year command in Gaul, modern-day France. Gaul is Caesar's forge. Over 9 years, from 58 to 50 BC, he wages a campaign of conquest that is part military genius, part systematic genocide. He defeats hundreds of tribes, kills over 1 million Gauls, and enslaves another 1 million. He writes it all down in his Commentaries on the Gallic War, sending regular dispatches back to Rome, written in clear, concise, third-person prose. He isn't just winning a war, he's managing his brand. He crosses the Rhine into Germany just to prove he can. He sails across the Channel to Britain, a mythical land at the edge of the world, just to show the Romans that there is no boundary to his ambition. But back in Rome, the alliance is fraying. Julia, Caesar's daughter, who had been married to Pompey to cement the pact, dies in childbirth. The emotional bridge between the two men is broken. Then, in 53 BC, Crassus, desperate for his own military laurels, invades the Parthian Empire in the east. At the Battle of Carrhae, his legions are routed by horse archers. Crassus is killed. Legend says the Parthians poured molten gold down his throat as a symbol of his insatiable greed. The triumvirate is dead. Now there are two. The Senate, terrified of Caesar's rising power and his ultra-loyal legions, makes its move. They reach out to Pompey. They convince him that Caesar is the true threat to the Republic. Pompey, jealous of his younger rival's success, agrees to be the Senate's champion. In January of 49 BC, the Senate issues its ultimate decree. Caesar must disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen to face trial for war crimes committed during his consulship. Caesar knows what that means. A trial means political exile or death. He has 8 legions behind him. He stands at the banks of a small, shallow river in northern Italy, the Rubicon. It is the boundary of his province. To cross it with arms is treason. He hesitates, according to the historians. He looks at his men. Then he speaks the words that would define every irreversible decision in history. Alea iacta est. The die is cast. He steps into the water. The civil war has begun. Caesar moves with terrifying speed, a quality the Romans called celeritas. He doesn't wait for Pompey to mobilize. He marches down the spine of Italy so fast that Pompey and the majority of the Senate are forced to abandon Rome, fleeing across the Adriatic to Greece to consolidate their forces. Caesar takes Rome without firing a shot, secures the treasury, then turns west to eliminate Pompey's legions in Spain before turning east to face the man himself. The decisive clash occurs in 48 BC at Pharsalus in the plains of northern Greece. Pompey has twice the number of infantry and a massive cavalry force. He expects to sweep Caesar's flanks.
But Caesar anticipates the move. He conceals a reserve line of infantry behind his right flank, instructing his veteran soldiers not to throw their javelins, but to use them as pikes, aiming directly at the faces of Pompey's young aristocratic horsemen. The cavalry panics and flees. Caesar turns his line into Pompey's exposed infantry. It is a rout. Pompey flees to Egypt, hoping to find sanctuary with the young pharaoh, Ptolemy XIII. Instead, as he steps onto the beach at Alexandria, he is stabbed in the back by the pharaoh's advisors, who think they are doing Caesar a favor. When Caesar arrives in Egypt and is presented with Pompey's severed head, he doesn't celebrate. He weeps. Pompey was a Roman citizen, a consul, his son-in-law. Caesar stays in Egypt for a time, diving into a civil war between Ptolemy and his sister, Cleopatra. He places Cleopatra on the throne, secures Egypt's vast grain supplies for Rome, and then sweeps through Asia Minor, defeating a rebellious king so quickly he summarizes it in 3 words: Veni, Vidi, Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. By 45 BC, the last Republican resistance is crushed in Africa and Spain. Caesar returns to Rome as the undisputed master of the world. He is a politician of immense vision. He doesn't launch a Sulla-style purge. Instead, he introduces a policy of clementia, clemency. He pardons his enemies, invites them back into the government, and tries to rebuild the state. He fixes the broken Roman calendar, introducing the solar year of 365 days, the Julian calendar we still use today with minor modifications. He grants citizenship to people in the provinces, reforms the tax system, and launches a massive public works program to employ the poor. But he keeps accumulating power. He is made dictator for a year, then 10 years. Finally, in February of 44 BC, he is named Dictator Perpetuo, dictator in perpetuity, forever. This is the breaking point. To the old senatorial elite, this is the death of the republic. The system of checks and balances is gone. The assemblies are a rubber stamp. A conspiracy forms in the shadows. It is led by Marcus Junius Brutus, a descendant of the man who expelled the last king 500 years before, and Gaius Cassius Longinus. They don't see themselves as murderers, they see themselves as liberators. They believe that if they remove the tyrant, the old republic will naturally revive, like a flower after a winter frost. March 15th, 44 BC. The Ides of March. The Senate meets in the theater of Pompeii because the Senate House is being rebuilt. Caesar enters. The conspirators surround him under the pretext of presenting a petition. Tullius Cimber pulls Caesar's toga from his shoulders, the signal to strike. Casca stabs him first in the neck. Caesar fights back, but then he sees Brutus, his friend, perhaps his son from an old affair, with a dagger in his hand. According to Suetonius, Caesar says nothing. He pulls his toga over his head and his face, wrapping himself in his own dignity, and falls at the base of Pompey's statue. He is stabbed 23 times. The liberators rush out into the streets shouting, "Liberty is restored!" But the streets are silent. The people are not celebrating. They are terrified, locking their doors. The liberators made a fundamental mistake. They killed the dictator, but they did not realize that the republic was already dead. The vacuum must be filled. Caesar's right-hand man, the charismatic, hard-drinking general Mark Antony, takes control of the city, using Caesar's funeral to deliver a brilliant, manipulative speech that turns the mob into a rioting force, burning the houses of the conspirators. But Antony's claim to the succession is interrupted by a ghost. Caesar's will is opened. He didn't adopt Antony. He adopted his 18-year-old great-nephew, Gaius Octavius. Octavian, as he is now called, is a frail, sickly teenager with no military experience. Antony dismisses him. But Octavian possesses a cold, calculating political intelligence that belies his years. He arrives in Italy, claims his inheritance, and thousands of Caesar's veteran soldiers rally to his name alone. Realizing they cannot destroy each other without destroying themselves, Octavian, Antony, and a third general, Lepidus, form the Second Triumvirate in 43 BC. Unlike the first, this is a legal dictatorship recognized by the Senate at the point of a sword. They begin with a bloodbath. They revive Sulla's prescriptions to eliminate their domestic enemies and raise money. Their most famous victim is Cicero, the great orator and defender of the Republic who had spoken out against Antony. Cicero's hands and tongue are cut off and nailed to the rostra in the Forum. In 42 BC, Antony and Octavian sailed to Greece and crushed the armies of Brutus and Cassius at the Battle of Philippi. The liberators commit suicide. The Republic is buried. Now, the world is split in half. Antony takes the wealthy, glamorous East, falling into the arms of Cleopatra in Alexandria. Octavian takes the cold, difficult West, including Rome itself, managing the veterans and building his power base. Octavian launches a brilliant propaganda war. He paints Antony not as a Roman general, but a man bewitched by a foreign queen, abandoning his heritage to build an Eastern monarchy. By 32 BC, the Cold War turns hot. The final showdown occurs in 31 BC at the Battle of Actium, a naval engagement off the coast of Greece. Octavian's brilliant admiral, Marcus Vicinius Agrippa, outmaneuvers Antony's heavy ships with smaller, more agile vessels. Antony and Cleopatra flee to Egypt. A year later, as Octavian's forces close in on Alexandria, both commit suicide. Egypt is annexed as Octavian's personal estate. Octavian is 32 years old. He is the master of the Western world. He returns to Rome in 29 BC. He knows the lessons of history. He knows that if he calls himself a king, he will be assassinated. If he keeps an overt military dictatorship, the Senate will revolt. So he plays a masterclass in political theater. In 27 BC, he steps before the Senate and announces that he is surrendering all his extraordinary powers back to the Senate and the people of Rome. The Republic, he says, is restored. The Senate, well coached and terrified of another civil war, panics. They beg him to retain command of the most volatile provinces, the ones with the legions. He reluctantly agrees. They vote him a new title, Augustus, the revered one. He doesn't call himself king, rex, or dictator. He calls himself princeps, first citizen. He is just a humble servant of the state, working within the traditional framework of the Constitution. He holds the power of a tribune, the power of a consul, and the command of the army, but he wears a simple toga and walks the streets like a regular citizen. It is a beautiful lie, and it works. The Republic is gone. The Roman Empire has begun. With Augustus, the world changes its rhythm. The frantic, bloody cadence of the late Republic gives way to a long, deep exhale known as the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. For 200 years, from Augustus to Marcus Aurelius, the Mediterranean basin enjoys a period of stability, economic integration, and security unprecedented in human history. Augustus rebuilds Rome. He famously boasts, I found a city of brick and left it a city of marble. He creates the first permanent police force, the first fire brigade, and the Praetorian Guard, an elite unit of bodyguards stationed in and around the city to ensure internal order. He secures the borders, establishing them along natural barriers, the Rhine and the Danube to the north, the Sahara Desert to the south, the Atlantic to the west, and the Euphrates to the east. Inside these borders, civilization thrives.
Let us look at the architecture of this piece. It is an empire of cities. Rome itself grows to a population of over 1 million people, a size no other city in the world would match until London in the 19th century. To keep this urban colossus alive, the Romans build miracles of engineering. Think of the aqueducts, massive stone arches marching across plains and valleys, driven entirely by the invisible hand of gravity. They carry millions of gallons of fresh mountain water every day into the heart of the city, feeding public baths, fountains, and private homes. Think of the roads. Over 50,000 miles of paved stone highways stretching from the deserts of Syria to the highlands of Scotland. These were not built for tourists, they were built for the speed of the legions. A Roman army could march 25 miles a day, every day, in any weather, across any terrain. But behind the legions came the merchants, the letter carriers, the ideas.
An empire built on conquest transforms into an empire built on logistics, but the system depends heavily on the character of the man at the top. The succession is always a gamble, a game of Russian roulette played with genetics and political leverage. Augustus is succeeded by his stepson, Tiberius, a cold, brooding general who spends his final years hiding in his villa on the island of Capri, leaving the government to the murderous ambitions of his Praetorian prefect, Sejanus. Then comes Caligula, 37 to 41 AD. His name means little boots, given to him as a boy by his father's soldiers. He begins with joy, but quickly descends into megalomania, paranoia, and cruelty. He declares himself a living god, enters into relationships with his sisters, and legend says he threatened to make his favorite horse, Incitatus, a consul, just to humiliate the Senate. He is assassinated by his own bodyguards in a dark corridor of the palace.
The Praetorians find Caligula's uncle Claudius hiding behind a curtain in the palace, trembling with fear. They don't kill him, they proclaim him emperor. Claudius is a scholar, mocked for his physical infirmities, but he turns out to be an administrator of genius. He centralizes the imperial bureaucracy, builds the great harbor at Ostia, and launches the conquest of Britain, bringing a new island into the imperial orbit. Claudius is poisoned, likely by his wife Agrippina, to clear the path for her son, Nero, 54 to 68 AD. Nero is an artist in his own mind, a performer who craves the applause of the theater more than the duty of the state. In 64 AD, a catastrophic fire destroys 2/3 of Rome. Rumors spread that Nero sang of the fall of Troy while the city burned, the origin of the myth that he fiddled while Rome burned. To deflect blame, Nero targets a small, bizarre, underground religious sect from Judea, the Christians. He rounds them up, covers them in pitch, and lights them as human torches to illuminate his night gardens. Nero's extravagance and his executions of prominent generals spark a military revolt. Abandoned by the Senate and the Praetorians, Nero cuts his own throat, crying out his final words, "Qualis artifacts perio," "What an artist dies in me." With Nero, the Julio-Claudian dynasty ends. The year 69 AD is known as the Year of the Four Emperors. It is a brief, violent reminder of the Republic's old lesson. The true power rests with the armies in the field.
4 generals compete for the throne, but the man who wins is Titus Flavius Vespasianus. Vespasian is a no-nonsense middle-class soldier from the Sabine country. He restores the treasury, brings stability, and begins construction on a massive amphitheater over the site of Nero's private lake, the Flavian Amphitheater. We know it today as the Colosseum. It is a monument to public entertainment, an arena where the empire's power is dramatized through gladiatorial combat, wild beast hunts, and executions. It is the ultimate manifestation of the policy of bread and circuses. Keep the urban masses fed with subsidized grain and distracted with blood sports, and they will never ask for their freedom back. The Flavian dynasty gives way to the Golden Age of Rome, the 5 good emperors, 96 to 180 AD. This is a period where the succession is determined not by biology, but merit. Each emperor adopts the most capable man in the empire as his son and heir. First is Nerva, who stabilizes the transition. He adopts Trajan, 98 to 117 AD, a brilliant general from Spain, the first emperor born outside of Italy. Trajan is an expansionist. He crosses the Danube to conquer Dacia, modern Romania, seizing its vast gold mines to finance a golden age of public buildings in Rome. He campaigns in the east, capturing the Parthian capital of Ctesiphon and pushing the borders of the empire to their absolute maximum extent. Under Trajan, Rome is at its biggest, its richest, its most powerful. He is succeeded by Hadrian, 117 to 138 AD. Hadrian is an intellectual, a lover of Greek culture, and a realist. He understands that the empire cannot expand forever without collapsing under its own weight. He reverses Trajan's eastern conquests and adopts a strategy of consolidation. He travels to every province in the empire, building walls to define the borders. In northern Britain, he builds Hadrian's Wall, a 73-mile stone barrier across the neck of the island, a physical statement that the expansion has stopped. In Rome, Hadrian rebuilds the Pantheon, a temple to all the gods. It features a massive concrete dome with an opening at the top, the oculus, that lets in a single moving shaft of sunlight. It remains the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world today, a testament to Roman engineering and material science. After the peaceful reign of Antoninus Pius, the throne passes to Marcus Aurelius, 161 to 180 AD. Marcus Aurelius is the philosopher king dreamed of by Plato. He is a Stoic, a man of quiet contemplation who hates war, but spends his entire reign living in a military tent on the frozen northern frontier, fighting off Germanic invasions along the Danube. Every night, after the battles are done, he retreats to his journal, writing down his thoughts, his struggles, his reminders to be a good man despite the corrupting influence of absolute power. We know these writings today as his meditations. He writes about the brevity of life, the insignificance of fame, the duty to serve the common good. He writes while a devastating plague, the Antonine Plague, is tearing through the empire, killing millions, emptying cities, and weakening the army. Marcus Aurelius is the end of the high noon. He breaks the tradition of adoption and leaves the empire to his biological son, Commodus. Commodus, 180 to 192 AD, is not a philosopher. He is an unstable narcissist obsessed with the arena. He renaming Rome after himself, Colonia Commodiana, and fights as a gladiator in the Colosseum, slaughtering wounded soldiers and wild beasts while the crowd watches in horrified silence. He is strangled in his bath by his wrestling partner on New Year's Eve, 192 AD. The golden age is over. The long afternoon begins. If the 2nd century was a garden, the 3rd century is a slaughterhouse. From 235 to 284 AD, the Roman Empire falls into a 50-year abyss known as the crisis of the 3rd century. It is a perfect storm of systemic failure, political chaos, economic collapse, barbarian invasions, and plague. The political system breaks down completely. There are more than 26 barracks emperors during this period. A general declares himself emperor, is murdered by his own troops after a few months, and his assassin becomes the next emperor, only to suffer the same fate. The throne is sold to the highest bidder. The borders collapse. Germanic tribes, the Goths, the Alemanni, the Franks, pour across the Rhine and the Danube, plundering deep into Italy and Greece. In the east, a powerful new superpower rises, the Sasanian Persian Empire. In 260 AD, the Persian king Shapur I captures the Roman Emperor Valerian alive in battle. Legend says Shapur used the living Roman emperor as a footstool to mount his horse, and when Valerian died, he was stuffed and mounted on a palace wall as a trophy. The empire splinters. Spain, Gaul, and Britain break away to form the independent Gallic Empire. In the east, the desert city of Palmyra, led by the brilliant Queen Zenobia, seizes control of Egypt and Syria. The economy collapses. To pay the soldiers, successive emperors debase the coinage, melting down the silver denarius and mixing it with cheap copper. By 270 AD, the Roman coin is worth less than 1% of its original value. Hyperinflation tears through the market. Trade grinds to a halt. The complex integrated market of the Mediterranean disintegrates into a primitive localized barter economy. People flee the cities. The grand urban centers of the Pax Romana are surrounded by thick, defensive brick walls. The world is shrinking. The man who pulls the empire back from the edge of the cliff is Diocletian, 284 to 305 AD. Diocletian is a low-born soldier from Dalmatia who rises through the ranks. He is a pragmatist. He looks at the map and realizes what no one had dared to admit. The Roman Empire is too large to be ruled by one man from one city. He launches the Tetrarchy, the rule of 4. He divides the empire into 2 halves, the Western Empire and the Eastern Empire. Each half is ruled by a senior emperor called an Augustus, who is assisted by a junior emperor called a Caesar. Rome is abandoned as a functional capital. The rulers move their courts closer to the frontiers, to Milan, Nicomedia, Trier, Sirmium. Diocletian reorganizes the army, expands the bureaucracy, freezes prices to combat inflation, and binds workers to their professions, effectively laying the groundwork for medieval feudalism. He transforms the imperial office. The humble princeps of Augustus is dead. Diocletian is the dominus, the lord and master. He wears silk robes, a diadem of jewels, and anyone approaching his throne must prostrate themselves on the floor. The citizen has become a subject. Diocletian saves the empire, but he cannot save his system of succession. The moment he retires to grow cabbages at his palace in Split, the Tetrarchy falls into a series of civil wars. Out of the smoke of these civil wars rises Constantine the Great, 306 to 337 AD. In 312 AD, Constantine marches on Rome to face his rival Maxentius at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. On the night before the battle, according to the Christian historian Lactantius, Constantine looks up at the sky and sees a vision, a cross of light above the sun, with the inscription, In hoc signo vinces. In this sign you shall conquer. Constantine orders his soldiers to paint the Christian monogram, the Chi Rho, onto their shields. He wins the battle. Maxentius drowns in the Tiber. Constantine's victory changes the spiritual trajectory of the world. In 313 AD, he issues the Edict of Milan, granting full legal toleration to Christianity. The underground faith that had survived centuries of sporadic, brutal persecution is suddenly embraced by the state. Constantine does not just tolerate Christianity, he finances it. He builds the first great basilicas, including the original St. Peter's in Rome, exempts the church from taxes, and calls the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD to standardize Christian theology.
Why did he do it? It was a stroke of political genius. The old pagan gods were tied to local traditions, cities, and regions. Christianity was a universal religion, an ideology that transcended borders and classes. In an empire that had been fractured for a century, Constantine used the singular structure of the church to bind the state together. One God, one emperor, one empire. Then he builds a new capital. He realizes that the economic and military gravity of the empire has shifted irrevocably to the east. The West is poor, rural, and constantly threatened by barbarians. The East is wealthy, urban, and controls the great trade routes of Asia and Egypt. In 330 AD, on the site of the ancient Greek city of Byzantium, sitting on the narrow Bosphorus Straits between Europe and Asia, Constantine dedicates his new city, Constantinople, the new Rome. It is built as a Christian city, free from the pagan memories of old Rome. It is a fortress, protected by water on 3 sides and massive walls on the 4th. For the next 1,100 years, Constantinople would stand as the heart of the Roman world. Old Rome is left behind in the dark. The partition of the empire becomes permanent after the death of Emperor Theodosius I, AD 395. The Eastern Empire, rich and secure, thrives. The Western Empire, poor and depleted, enters its final, agony-filled century. The borders are no longer lines in the sand, they are sieves. Germanic tribes are no longer just raiders, they are nations on the move, pushed westward by a terrifying new force originating from the steppes of Central Asia, the Huns. The Huns are horse archers of unparalleled ferocity. They move like a storm, destroying everything in their path. Terrified, the Visigoths crossed the Danube into Roman territory in 378 AD, seeking sanctuary. But Roman officials exploit them, starving them, trading dog meat for Gothic children to sell into slavery. The Goths revolt. In 378 AD, at the Battle of Adrianople, the Visigoths crush the Eastern Roman army, killing the Emperor Valens. It is a catastrophic defeat. The Romans cannot replace their losses. They are forced to sign treaties allowing entire barbarian tribes to settle inside the empire's borders as foederati, allies who retain their own laws and leaders but fight in the Roman army. The Roman army is no longer Roman. It is an army of barbarians fighting other barbarians under a Roman flag. In 410 AD, the unthinkable happens. The Visigoths, led by Alaric, march down Italy and sack the city of Rome itself. For 3 days, they plunder the ancient capital, burning palaces, looting temples. The physical damage is limited, but the psychological shockwave hits the entire Mediterranean. Saint Jerome, writing from his monastic cell in Bethlehem, weeps. The
The city which had taken the whole world was itself taken. The Western Empire is now a ghost, a collection of barbarian kingdoms operating under a fading Roman fiction. The Vandals conquer North Africa, cutting off Rome's grain supply. The Franks take Gaul. The Angles and Saxons take Britain. By the middle of the 5th century, the Western Emperor is a puppet, controlled by barbarian generals who hold the title of Magister Militum, Master of Soldiers. The final act is quiet. In 476 AD, a Germanic general named Odoacer decides he no longer needs a puppet on the throne. He deposes the last Western Roman emperor, a 16-year-old boy named, with a tragic irony, Romulus Augustulus. Little Romulus. Odoacer doesn't take the title of emperor. He packs up the imperial insignia, the purple cloak, the diadem, the eagle standards, and sends them back to Constantinople to the Eastern Emperor Zeno with a message. There is no need for a separate emperor in the West. One ruler in Constantinople is enough for both of us. Odoacer styles himself King of Italy. The Western Roman Empire is dead. The ancient world ends with a whimper. But let us pause before we close the ledger. Let us look around the world we inhabit today. Did Rome truly die? The Eastern Roman Empire survived for another 1,000 years, known to modern historians as the Byzantine Empire. They still called themselves Romans, preserved Roman law, and defended their capital until the walls of Constantinople were finally breached by Ottoman cannons in 1453. But look closer to home. Every time you look at a modern republic, every time you talk about a senate, a veto, a census, or a citizen, you are speaking the language of the Roman Forum. Every time you walk past a modern courthouse or capitol building with columns and a dome, you are looking at the architecture of the Palatine Hill. The Roman legal tradition, the idea that a person is innocent until proven guilty, that contracts are binding, that the law must be written down, forms the foundation of Western jurisprudence. The language of the legions, Latin, did not vanish. It fractured and softened, transforming into French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, and Romanian. Even English is saturated with Latin vocabulary. The church that Constantine embraced preserved the administrative structure of the empire. The Bishop of Rome still holds the title Pontifex Maximus, the ancient title of the chief priest of the pagan republic. Rome did not fall. It shifted. It dissolved into the groundwater of global civilization. It remains the great concrete foundation upon which the modern world is constructed. A dream born in the mud of the Tiber, refined through 500 years of liberty and conflict, and frozen into a monument of stone that time itself could never completely dismantle. Thank you for listening to this journey through the rise, the triumphs, and the transformation of the Roman Empire. If this epic story brought you a sense of wonder and helped you relax tonight, please consider supporting the channel. Take a moment to like this video, leave a comment below with your favorite part of the story, share it with someone who loves history, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us create more deep, immersive storytelling designed to help you unwind and explore the past. Sleep well, and until next time, may your dreams be filled with history.